Welcome back to My Inner Anchor, guys. Thank you for everyone who's tuned in over the last 10 weeks now. This is our 10th one, so it feels a little special. So last week was a special episode, with being the very first of the episodes where I bring a guest with me. So thank you to everyone who's tuned in and all the feedback and nice comments I had on those. Back to yours truly today, but there will be further guests on future episodes. And if there's any topics you'd like me to discuss that you feel I could add some weight to for you, or some value, or things you'd be interested in my opinion, do get in touch via the socials, and we can see if we can make that work for you. Can't believe it's 10 weeks in now, so thank you for allowing me to share my space with you. Thank you for sharing some space with me, and just thank you for listening and all the positive comments and things I've had. Hopefully it's healed some things for some people who are listening. So on today's show, on this one, we are going to step into a topic kind of shaped my life a lot. I think it shaped a lot of people. That topic is anger, and this one is titled "Anger is an Energy." Now, I'm not talking about the stereotype here, not the shade, not the calm down mate version, the actual real emotion of anger. And because a lot of us, men, women, however you identify, non-binary, all us humans on the planet, for a lot of us, anger is our base emotion. It's the first emotion that rises. Maybe it's the first emotion that we could identify when we were growing up, the first thing that we understood, that kind of first language. It's the quickest thing to surface, the easiest thing to reach for. For most of my life, and I'd still say till today, I just harness it differently. Anger is my first language. It's that first emotion I showed honestly and authentically that had a reaction. But here's the truth that I wanted to explore today. I truly believe that anger is an emotion like any emotion. It isn't negative or toxic until it's suppressed, until it's unprocessed, until it hasn't been dealt with, until it isn't used and channeled into the right things. So this episode touches upon some topics of conversation that we spoke about when I was talking about masculinity and toxicity and banter, brotherhood over banter, and being present. And going also into the sort of grounding tools that we'll be talking about in the next few episodes. This is kind of the heat before the stillness, if you like. The sort of it's anger, isn't it? So it's when the fuse has been lit, to use a martial arts term, and we'll kind of go into that. I wanted to start with something really personal and honest. This doesn't come from a point of being zen. This is never what the inner anchor has been about. Anger didn't just show up in my life. It arrived pretty early on in growing up, and it arrived hard. My first experience of anger wasn't a righteous one. Some people might say it's noble. Looking back, I don't think it was noble. I didn't even really understand it. It was fear that turned into rage, that turned into anger. I was heavily bullied as a child. I had epilepsy. Kids can be cruel. Not all kids, obviously. Some kids are great, but it happens. People trying to, and it might not be. I imagine most people listening have been bullied to some degree. It might have been verbal. It might have been physical. It might have just been a case of being ostracised or teased and those kind of things. When I was a kid, it was all of them, and it was pretty horrendous. And basically, I had to walk from the middle school down to the primary school to meet my mum and my sister. And every day that I did that, there was an alley. And as I walked down the alley, a gang of 5 older kids would jump me and try and kick me into having a fit. And this went on for a period of time. Now, when you're a kid and you're being bullied and you don't necessarily have the kind of emotional vocabulary to say, I feel unsafe, I feel humiliated, I feel powerless, the body kind of does what it knows to do, and that's to produce, there's a frustration there that turns to rage, which turns to anger. And that was the first time I felt the anger's force as well. Just as like a sheer energy shift. Bit of a surge, I guess you'd call it. A feeling of wanting, think I need to protect myself. I didn't know how to use it. What I did was I just, I said this happened every day for a period of months. My parents knew what was going on. They were amazingly supportive, both my mum and dad. They were incredible and really supportive, really understanding. My dad didn't do the stereotypical macho thing. He was there for his boy, and of course he wanted his boy to protect himself, but he was there for me to talk to listen to. I've had friends who were bullied and we were in scenarios where a parent almost were like, well, get back out there, show him who's boss, and that's not always the right thing. My dad didn't do that. But I took that for a long time, a couple of months maybe. And then one day I lost it. I lost my temper and I threw a punch. And it was just I'm not going to say I turned into, anyone of any note. I didn't turn into Anthony Joshua or anything. I was just a kid and I just lashed out. I decided if I was going to go down again, I was going to go down swinging. And I landed this punch. Fortunately for me, it landed quite well. And then, a bit of a fracas ensued. But after that, I was left alone. And that was the first time I kind of married up that emotion, okay. I did something about it. I used this energy, because, flight or fight situation, right? So you feel that energy about it. I wasn't really sure how to use it. I didn't really know how to process it, but I knew it was there. And all I knew is that, I went to a point of wanting to be seen. I wasn't. The teachers were horrendous. I was basically ignored. The teachers didn't want to deal with bullying like a lot of schools don't. The most they ever did was they said they would let me out of school 5 minutes early, basically. So I'd have a 5-minute head start. That was kind of their way of support, which is rubbish. And I learned at quite an early age, I guess, that when it comes to protecting myself, although my parents were there to back me up, I was kind of on my own. Kids did what kids do. When your friends being bullied, they were scared too, so they kind of stepped away from me. I've always said until my mate Max landed in middle school in year 7, I don't really believe I ever had a true friend, and this was before that period. But what I did learn is once I threw that punch, I was left alone. So it was a learned behaviour. Then I wanted to just cut out the middle bit, if you know what I mean. The months of having my head kicked in, being targeted, being physically assaulted, being beaten up, whatever you want to call it. I wanted to obviously cut out that middleman, and I just wanted it was going to stop before it happened, So then I was quite an angry kid, and became known that after a while, don't say anything, Lee, you should get whack in the nose. And it wasn't a tough thing. I'm not a tough guy. That's not how I roll. But what it was a learned behaviour. That, right, they've said something negative, we'll cut out the middleman. So if they take the mick, they take the piss, I'll punch them and it will stop like it did last time. That was my learned pattern of behaviour. And I think lots of people learn that through different things they might have experienced and things they might have seen. But obviously, it's not... The energy is okay, but direction was all wrong, The first channel and first person I ever had to help me channel that and to direct it in a safe, in a positive way, was when I first went to martial arts, and I first had an encounter with a man who's been very influential in my life, Mr. Nick Pammon. Nick, if I know you listen to the podcast, so if you're listening, sorry, you're getting another mention, but you've been so influential in many times in my life, as I've said before on this show. Martial arts and training Taekwondo with Nick at first at this point, it became my first safe outlet. It was my first way of turning the anger, the frustration, into movement, into putting it out and venting it in a physical way that wasn't chaos, that wasn't hurtful to others, that wasn't just, it was, I didn't boil up and then just lash out. I think some people miss the point of martial arts. They see it as violence, or martial arts, boxing, anything like that, mixed MMA. I think some people, kickboxing, anything. I think people do see it as just a violent hobby, and it's not. It teaches you so much more. And if you've ever trained in any kind of art form of that notion, whether it be boxing or MMA or rugby or anything like that, I think it teaches you a lot of things. For me, it taught me discipline. It taught me respect of others, respect of myself, respect of that energy that I was feeling. It taught me control, breathing, meditation, the difference between force and power. It taught me, it was the first time anger felt like something I could use, not something that consumed me. I could go to martial arts when I was having a bad day, and that frustration was there, and it was building. And I don't know about yourselves, I can only talk from my own standpoint, but I can always feel it in myself. It's like a tension thing, I guess. I can just feel it within me. I can feel it building. Martial arts, when I first started training with Nick, if I had those frustrations, I knew I could go to training, and not only would we exert it through hitting pads and training and katas, and it was a really good channel for that. You are throwing punches, even if you're just shadow boxing or going through routines and techniques, or kicking bands, kicking the body bags, and all those kind of things. And when you're partnering up with someone and you're sparring, it's a respect thing, because you're landing them, and some people like myself, I always like to train hard, and I like that energy. That's something that's really positive for me. It's just the way I am. Some people not, but you respect each other on that. What on you talk it through, like, okay, how do you want to do this? We're just doing light touches. There's a conversation, there's a communication, which is all a huge thing with anger, and how to process that. And martial arts taught me all of this, so much so that I did go back to it. I went with Nick initially from, I think I was around at 7 or 8 till I was about 14, 15, and I loved it. And the only reason I ever gave it up was because I couldn't get there anymore. I couldn't get there. I was going with a friend's brother who quit. He lost interest, and then for a while I was getting lifts and things, and then they ceased. Basically, when the person who was giving me lift kind of got fed up with being the one to take me, it started before my dad got home from work. And for a little while I was cycling from school into town to do it, but when it became darker nights, then that wasn't safe really for a 14, 15 year old kid, and I had to give up, and I was gutted. I really didn't want to give up, and I always had it in my head that I would go back to it, and I did eventually. And the reason I'm telling these stories is not for sympathy or anything. It's because I need to tell people where I'm coming from on this. It's where my background came from, because I don't think I'm the only one who's had to go through these things. And as we'll go through in a little bit more, there's a kind of narrative at the moment that anger is linked to toxic behaviour, and of course it is if it's not processed, if it's not dealt with in the right way, if you're not channeling it through the way, and if you've never been taught how to use it in the right way, then like anything, you can misuse it. You know, no one would think of as a spoon as a weapon, but in the wrong hands or with the wrong attitude, you could absolutely do some damage with it. You know, it's that kind of thing. And then obviously the part of that was as a child and growing up, and then the side of anger that kind of came in later in life, but not much later really. We're talking about being a teenager there, and I was 22 when this side of it came into play, and that was the anger that shaped my adulthood, I guess, was when my dad died. My grief didn't come out as sadness. In fact, it didn't come out at all. I've said about this, I suppressed it. But the bits that did show was the angry side, because I knew how to deal with that emotion. I knew how to showcase it. I knew how to reach out to it. I was really angry about it. Like a lot of people when they experience grief, I was angry at the unfairness of it all, the loss, angry at everyone else for carrying on with their lives, angry with myself for not knowing what to do, angry with myself for not feeling like I could turn to people, angry at those for trying to advise me in not the way that I would want to deal with things, angry at those who directly or indirectly made me feel like I should suppress everything. There was a lot of anger there, and I didn't deal with it all the right way. It was physically in me, that anger, and it was 13 days from diagnosis to my dad passing away, which it was just a mind screw up in itself. My dad was the one I always spoke to. He was the one who really instilled a notion of having a place to talk so openly, and when he died that seemed to dissipate, and people seemed to go quiet, myself included, and I know that's another thing I'm angry at with myself, and that anger just stayed there, unprocessed, and it did drive me forward in a lot of ways. For 15 years it was a force, it was an energy that pushed me forward, it kept me moving, actually helped me build Just Push Play. That became an outlet for everything, and I'm very, very proud of Just Push Play and everything it's achieved. It was something that mattered, something that came from love, but it was fueled by anger. Angry at those who would no longer talk about my dad. And for the record, that's not my mum or my sister. They always do. As does Sean, my mum's other half. My sister's other half, Lou, my wife Jo, they all talk about him, but some extended do not. It was anger of, you're not willing to talk about dad, and if I talk about him, you're going to go quiet and weird on me. Make him feel like a taboo subject. He's not, and he will never be a taboo subject in my life. But you don't want me to talk about it? Well, I'm going to get 800 people in a room and we're going to play some music that Dad and I loved, bands that Dad would have loved, and I'm going to stand on stage and talk about them, so you're damn well going to listen. It was that fueling. And although what Just Push Play did of bringing people together who've been through similar things, a lot of people who come along to the show have experienced their own losses. So there was a coming together there. He was obviously raising money for the hospice who looked after my dad, where I'm now fortunate enough to work. People used it as their own outlet and support, and it was just a real nice thing. It is a really nice thing. It's a very positive thing. But it was fueled with this frustration and anger at myself for not carrying myself forward and trying to find a new way. And it kept me going when frankly a lot of other things didn't. And I didn't think it was particularly toxic because I wasn't taking drugs, I wasn't abusing alcohol, I wasn't violent towards anyone, I wasn't, belittling or anything like that, or You know, there was nothing about it that was on that negative side of behaviour. Something good was coming from it. But the problem is that anger kept me going for when nothing else could, but it can only carry you so far. It can carry you really far, but it can't carry you forever. And not dealing with those things meant I was only running on that one emotion. I wasn't running on other anchors to it. I wasn't running on self-love or confidence or honesty or authenticity all the time. I was just anger. And it showed up in many ways, and many of them were pretty positive. But that doesn't mean it's the right thing for you forever. You can't run on one thing forever. And when it's unprocessed, and there was a lot of unprocessed stuff that I only started unpacking a couple of years ago, going through CBT and counselling, and when it is that way, it doesn't, you're never really going to move forward, because there's a part of you that's stuck. And that was a frustration for me as well. I was stuck. In this period, of course, as well, I did go back to training with Nick and training with Defence Lab with Nick. I did that around 3 years after Dad died. It was building up and I could really feel it, and Nick put a post out saying he was going back to training the public with Defence Lab, and immediately I was like, oh, just sign me up. Just sign me up. And it did me so much good. It became my pressure release valve again. It helped me so much to shift the aggression and the frustration. It really did. But it was a pressure release valve. It wasn't a cure for what was lying beneath. It was a way to let off steam before I overheated. It kept me functional, it kept me steady, kept me from exploding, but it didn't heal the root of the cause, which was grief and stopping myself from grieving, because I was in a place where I didn't feel like I could do it in my way. The real healing point, as much as I've got thanks to Nick and Defence Lab, and I will maintain to this day that it helped me get through some of the worst places I've ever been in life, because it did, and it simply did. But there was an underground issue that I really needed to deal with, and being honest, I never really dealt with that until coming up for 2 years ago. It was CBT, it was counselling, the inner work, actually sitting with the anger instead of running alongside it, stopping, learning to process it, learning to understand it, learning to listen to what it was trying to tell me. And I'll be honest, that's the hardest work I've ever done in my life. But it was also the best thing I've ever done. It was tough sitting there, reliving things, being honest about how I had my part in what was going on, because I did stop myself. I didn't process things the right way. I wasn't moving forward. I wasn't living. I was sitting in it but not dealing with it. It was tough, and no doubt if you're listening, then you've been through a similar thing, maybe not to the same level or extremity, but you will have resonated with the title, so there'll be a part of you that knows that anger is there. But going through my CBT, finding my grounding techniques, was the best thing I've ever done. For the first time in my life, I wasn't sitting with anger. I wasn't accepting the anger. I was transforming it fully. And that's why I'm doing this episode. Because I know there are people out there who feel lost. Maybe they feel confused, overwhelmed. They might even feel ashamed of sitting with anger, of feeling their own anger. And it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's not. It's just as valid as any other emotion out there. So if you are listening, then I want you to know you're not broken, you're not dangerous, you're not toxic, you're not alone. You might not have just been taught or shown how to ground this anger, how to convert it, how to make it work for you and what you want to achieve, and turn it into this positive thing. Use it in the right way. Because I'll get a bit cultural, I guess, for want of a better term, for at least a while. There's a bit of a narrative about angry young men at the moment out there, and that immediately means toxic masculinity. And yes, there are some young men and more grown men who express their anger absolutely destructively, and that needs to be called out. And that does need to be pointed out, that that's not the right way to behave to yourself, to others, to society. But here's an issue I have. Sadly, the majority of the voice that young men are hearing about anger are the loudest voices. And as I've often said on this show, those speaking loudest often have the least to add. You know, they often have the least to say. They're not grounded. So the maniverse, the influencers, the so-called self-appointed alpha, which I hate, absolutely hate it, because by definition there's only one of you, and yet there's thousands of these idiots talking along the lines of Andrew Tate, and I don't want to give him any airtime, to be honest, but that kind of level of idiot. But they are actually talking to young men. That's where they're directing it, because there is a lot of confused young men out there, and they're telling young men that the anger you feel, that's dominance. Your anger makes you powerful. Your anger means you being wronged. Your anger is your identity, and it's all their fault. It's all these types of people's fault, and that's what they're telling them. And if that's the only outlet that you're being given, then that's what you're going to lean into. Because anger is real, and it's felt, and it's honest, and it's immediate, and it is powerful. It is, but it needs to be used in the right way. Because here's what they're not being told. They're not being told that anger can be grounding. It can be clarity. It can be direction. It can be purpose. But only when it's processed. Only when it's understood. When it's anchored. When it's utilized properly, healthily. There's a lot of men out there who need another voice. There's a lot of people out there who need another voice. A grounded voice. A steady voice. You know, a voice that says, your anger isn't the enemy, but you need how to learn to deal with it and how to hold it. Because it's like, well, it's energy, it's a chemical reaction, right? There are things that are pretty benign on their own that they use for, you know, destruction weapons, bombs, you know, the chemicals and elements that make up bombs. They're pretty benign on their own, right? Or pretty benign if they're not aggravated. Hold them in the wrong way, in the wrong combination. See how explosive it gets. And that's the same with any kind of energy, whether it's an energetic, physicality, chemical energy of that, or energy that we have within ourselves. It's all the same thing, you know. And anger is an energy. To quote Mr. Orton, you know, it's a signal. It's the body saying, you know, someone crossed that boundary, something feels unfair, I'm overwhelmed, I'm hurt, I'm scared, I'm exhausted, I'm disconnected, I don't know what's going on, how do I get out of this? But Anger is often the first responder to deeper emotions. It was my first response to grief. It was my first self-response to being bullied horrendously. To what's going on in my own family right now, with having gone through Mum's cancer battle, and now Sean's. There's a certain level of anger still there for me. But I know how to channel it, and I'm trying to do that the more positively. I've still got to have a word with myself. I'm not perfect. I've still got to keep myself in check. I've still got to be better at giving myself that time, and because I am value. I am absolutely allowed to do the things I need to do in terms of processing it. That's something I need to work on. Like I've said before, I'm not doing this podcast because I believe I'm perfect, because I'm not. But it's all about how you channel anger. I just say, anger's an energy, but energy needs direction. Most of us were never taught what to do with anger. We were taught that suppress it, pretend it's not there. This isn't a good thing. And it's not if it's directing negatively, or it's aimed at people who don't deserve that, or it's just channeled in a direction that's not positive. But the thing is, anger's like every other emotion on this planet. It's not meant to be buried. It's not meant to be unleashed on people. It's meant to be channeled. And I found a lot of grounding when doing my CBT and counselling, and it was something I wish someone had taught me, when I was a kid. And there's many ways you can do it. You can do what I call pausing the reaction. And there's a difference between a reaction and a response, which is one of the biggest lessons I've had. So when you can feel that anger rising like a reflex, everything in your body tells you to move fast on that, respond, react, go back to them, give it back. It's that want to immediately go back, whether it's verbal communication, email, whether you're writing, having a conversation there and then, in person. Pause, because the pause slows down your system just enough to stop a knee-jerk response, an automatic reaction, and we've all got them. Without the pause, anger then becomes misdirection. You're shouting, you're shutting down, you're withdrawing, you're overthinking, the self-punishment, oh, what's going on thing, that happens. So pause. Take a breath. Drop your shoulders. Walk out of the room if you have to. Just go, I need a minute. That isn't suppression. It's creating a space. And you know what? Name it. Say it. Say it out loud. Say it internally if you can't. Just say it. Be honest about it. Say the words, I'm angry. No, I'm not fine. No, I'm stressed. Identify whatever emotion it is you're feeling. Don't say, I'm fine, if you're angry. Say it. When you name something, you're shifting your thoughts from survival to awareness. It brings you into that moment. It brings you into be present. It puts your anchor in the ground and goes, this is where I am right now. You're perfectly entitled to say, you know what, I'm really upset. You know what, I'm angry. You know what, equally the other side of the coin, you know what, I'm actually really happy. You know what, I'm really excited about this. Whatever you're feeling, name it. Because you name it, you ground it, you put a sticker on it, and it just, being honest with yourself, it's being authentic. There's nothing worse than when you feel you have to hide your emotions. And we as Brits, and I am going to say this, as men, we're really good at hiding that. We're really, really good at going, yeah, I'm alright, thanks mate, how are you? And it can be anything. It can be anything. And something I've always I learned going back through this is anger has a home, and you can feel it. It's a physical thing. You can locate that heat, and you can stop fighting the emotion and start working with it. You know, it can live in your chest, in like chest pressure or stomach knots or hand tightness or tension in your back and shoulders or jaw clenching. You can move that energy. You can make it work. You can identify it at those points, and we all do it. You know, someone says something, you go, you know, we've all been there. You know, I was chatting to someone the other day who was telling me that, you know, I was asking about podcasts and what I was going to do this week, and I sort of told them, and they said, oh yeah, no, well, you know, their other half is struggles with their hearing, and they find themselves having to repeat themselves a lot. And they admitted that they find that frustrating, even though they know it's not their partner's fault, and you know, they can't help struggling with hearing, but it's that thing of having to keep repeating yourself, and then you feel frustrated, and you can feel that annoyance. And you know, if it's not dealt with singing, we all have little annoyances that build, and you can feel that. It could be a clenching of your jaw, or clenching your fist, or a tightening of your stomach knots, and all those kind of things. It's just ways of identifying this, you know. And the thing is, your anger is a message. It's not a malfunction in the body. It's rarely the first emotion. It's rarely the actual root emotion either. It's the messenger that comes from something deeper. It's where clarity begins. This is where anger actually becomes pretty useful. And asking yourself, what was my anger trying to tell me? You know, it could be signalling a number of things. A boundary was crossed, a value was violated, a truth was ignored, a need wasn't met, touched a nerve, touched a wound. You were fearful, the pressure was building. And don't try and force it, always let the truth rise on it. And, you know, anger without direction, it becomes destruction. But with direction, it becomes purpose. And once you understand the message, you can choose what to do with that energy. And that's where it becomes truly powerful instead of chaos. What these manifest idiots are teaching young men is chaos. It's not power. So if you're listening and you've listened to any of these idiots and you're looking for an outlet, that's not the one. That's not the one. Because I've said it before and I'll say it again. Do you think anyone who's truly strong sits there and shouts other people down? They don't. All they're aiming for is clickbait and likes on the socials. They don't care about us. So look for something more positive, however you deal with it. However you deal with it. And like I say, anger with direction, it becomes purpose. You can choose what to do with the energy. It is powerful. You can, you know, set those boundaries in a positive way. You can have a conversation and tackle things. Tackle those small moments of frustration. Be honest about it. You make decisions, you can make changes, you can be truthful. It can be a release. You know, I go to the gym, and going to the gym and working hard, that's my release. Meditation, that's my release. Reading is my release. For some people, as I've said before, that those still points, those releases are physical things. It's rugby, it's football, it's boxing, it's whatever it is for you. You all know what yours are. You know, you can be more committed to something if you utilise the anger in the right way, because you're passionate about whatever that root cause is. You know, it's a commitment. And you can ask yourself, where does this energy actually need to go? Not in a reactive way, but just intentionally. What do I need to do with this? Where is it going? What is happening? And where do I need to be? You can ground your body. Anger, it activates your nervous system. Your body needs to settle before the mind can see clearly. Grounding brings it back to ground. It brings it back to self. You cannot think clearly when you're in fight or flight mode. You need to bring it back down. Slow your breath. Feel your feet on the floor. Meditate, breath work, feel the weight of your body, all those things. This is the moment that your anger actually becomes usable. And it's a pathway, all of these things. It's not to suppress the anger, it's not to fear it, not to shame it, just channel it. Because anger isn't your enemy. But unprocessed anger is. When you pause, name it, locate it, listen to it, choose it, ground it, it becomes one of the most powerful forces in your life. And it's not one that's destructive, it's not one that's chaotic, it's not one that's overwhelmed. But grounded, clear, purposeful and anchored anger is just as valuable as any other emotion on this planet. Now, we have gone through some personal stuff today for myself. It's obviously a hot topic, and it might have triggered some responses for you. So I wanted to do a bit of a guided breath work for anger and for release. So let's take a moment to ground that heat, ground that anger. Find a comfortable position. Feet on the floor. Hands resting gently. Soften those shoulders. And let your body know you're safe to pause. If it feels safe to do so, just gently close your eyes. If not, just soften your gaze. Let the world fall back a little. Let the noise fade. Let the expectations loosen their grip. Remember, this moment is yours. Take a slow breath in through your nose. Feel that heat in your body. Feel where it lives. Where does it live for you? Is it in your chest? In your jaw? Perhaps it's in your stomach? In your hands? Could be anywhere in your body. But feel it. Hold it for a moment. Not to trap it, just to acknowledge it. And exhale slowly through your mouth. Let that heat soften. Let your body settle. Again, inhale through your nose. Feel that activation. Feel the truth beneath it. Feel what your anger is saying beneath the heat. Hold. And exhale slowly through your mouth. Release the tension. One more time slowly. Inhaling slowly. Let the breath meet the heat. Let it meet the truth. Hold it. And slowly exhale. Let the body drop a little deeper. Let those shoulders soften. Let that jaw unclench. Now bring your awareness to your feet. Feel the ground holding you. Feel the weight of your body. Feel the steadiness beneath the heat. Your breath is your anchor. Being present over perfect. And feel those feet on the ground. Let the ground support you. Remember, anger doesn't make you unstable. Disconnection does. It isn't the enemy. It's a signal. It's a message. It's a truth rising to the surface. Let your breath anchor you. Let the ground hold you. Let it become clarity. Take one more slow breath in. Feel the steadiness beneath the anger. Feel the truth beneath the reaction. And slowly exhale. Let the body settle into itself. Let your nervous system soften. Let that moment of clarity be. When you're ready, gently bring your awareness back to the room. Feel your feet, feel your hands, and feel your breath. When that feels right, slowly open your eyes. Remember, you're here, you are grounded, and you are steady. So thank you for joining me this week. If anyone's got any feedback they'd like to give me, then please do reach out. Thank you for listening. Anger shaped me. It protected me when I was young. It gave me some strength when I felt powerless. It fueled me through grief. And it pushed me to build things that mattered. But processing it, actually understanding it, has been the thing that has finally set me free. And I just wanted to say this clearly to everyone listening. You're not broken because you feel anger. You're not dangerous because you feel it. You're not weak because you don't know what to do with it yet. You might not have just been shown the grounded way, the way that works for you. And this is the thing, what works for me might not work for you. I'm not so egotistical to think it will. But this is why the podcast exists. I want people to know that may be feeling lost in their own emotions. Feeling like I was. Feeling confused, ashamed, overwhelmed, misunderstood. I know what it's like to think anger is the only language you have. But I've started to see that what it's like coming out the other side. And it's not the only tool in your arsenal. And I wanted to pass that on to anyone who might need it. Because if anger is the activation of everything, then clarity is your direction. And that's exactly where I'm going next week. Next week, we step into the biggest tools I've ever learned for grounding anger, for grounding generally, for processing my emotions, and actually understanding myself. And it is a tool that I never thought I would ever find any value in, and it became one of the most powerful things I've ever done, I ever still do, and that's journaling. Not the fluffy write your feelings down in this notebook, not the dramatic performative version, not the Instagram version, or it might be if that works for you, just the grounded version, the version that worked for me, why it became a very grounding tool for me, how it helped me process everything, and when writing slows your nervous system down and reveals truth. I'll share how journaling became, one of the tools that finally helped me process everything. So if today was about the anger and the emotion itself, next week is about the truth behind it and how to truly process it. Thank you for joining me once again, guys. I'll see you all next week. Remember, stay with your inner anchor, find your still points, be true to yourself.